Any comes I just myself
I will call this meeting to order on
changes
House
a
Bill
little different. It was satire. I
337
know it was satire.
and call
And he changed it.
Representative Mark Warden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of this distinguished committee.
Absolutely.
Representative Mark Warden,
Absolutely.
Hillsborough County, representing the towns of Goffstown, Deering, and Ware. Here is the prime sponsor of HB 337. Thank you. And we've heard most of this stuff in this past bill, so I will try to put a different spin on some of these arguments and maybe provide some new information for your consideration. And I really appreciate the committee members being open-minded. I realize that all of us have long-standing opinions on this issue of cannabis, and I'm asking you all to please suspend your prejudices and preconceived notions about this, and let's have an honest discussion about this. We are only 20 people on this committee, but we make laws and mandates that affect over 1 million people in this state, and that's a tall order. It's a very important piece of business that we're discussing today. So first of all, what this bill does, it simply removes the words cannabis and marijuana from section 318B of the RSAs. That's the Controlled Drug Act. It leaves intact all the scary substances that cause harm, like heroin, prescription drugs, painkillers, and crack cocaine. But it also removes the illegality of possessing so-called drug paraphernalia, such as pipes, bongs, and carburation tubes and masks, whatever those are. The way this bill is written, it's not very long, but section 9 at the end of the bill is the best and most important part. That's where the good stuff is done. The other sections previous to that are really sort of housekeeping to address other parts in RSA that refer to cannabis indirectly. We want to talk about changing cultural values. We heard from some young people today, and I can see that on this committee, the average age is probably over 50, I'm guessing. So I remember when I was a kid, we had black and white TV. Didn't have any remote controls. We were watching Andy Griffith and Walter Cronkite on TV. Some of you guys may remember that. So if there was a telephone at all in the house, it was plugged to a line and it had a rotary dial on it. So just as technology changes, so does the culture. People's mores, their hang-ups, what they consider to be decent behavior changes over time. When a lot of us were children, mixed-race marriages and same-sex marriages were inconceivable to many. So why are we stuck with a prohibition that's 80 years old on this issue? Most of you received this, I don't know if any of you read it, but the state legislative magazine, we got in our inbox, in the mailbox here this past week. They refer to this, they're talking about all the states that are legalizing marijuana or decriminalizing it. And they say the change in opinion about legalizing marijuana has followed a slow but steady course, rising from 12% in a 1969 Gallup poll to a record 50% in 2011. Generational differences in opinions about marijuana legalization reflect generational differences in its use. According to the 2011 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, most Americans between the ages of 12 and 60 have tried marijuana, while most Americans in their 60 or older have not. So I don't smoke pot. This doesn't directly impact me, but as a taxpayer, and as somebody who believes in civil liberties and humane treatment of our private citizens, this is a very important issue, and that's why I'm proud to sponsor this bill. It's also, I think, okay to somewhat discount what the spokesmen for law enforcement say about this. As these school kids were here earlier can tell us, the separation of powers is one of the most fundamental cornerstones of our system of jurisprudence in our society. We are the legislative branch. We make the laws that everybody has to follow. The executive branch is simply there to enforce those laws. So let's represent the people. Let's let the administration, the executive branch, do what they do and enforce the laws that we make here in Concord. A cynic might say that the more things are illegal, the more job security for courts, law enforcement, jailers, and attorneys. Some might say, I wouldn't say it, but some might say it's self-serving or a conflict of interest to continue to push, for them to continue to push to have things illegal. One of the most common opinions we hear in this committee on this particular issue is that federal government still considers cannabis a controlled substance. This is true, but who cares? Do you really think the feds are going to come crashing down your door, guns drawn, shooting your dogs, just for somebody smoking marijuana in the living room? No, the federal government can't get out of its own way. It's collapsing under its own weight. I'm not worried about the federal government. We've pushed back with Real ID in the past. We can do it on this issue. We can be at the forefront of this important civil liberties issue. One more thing about the economics of this. Just earlier this week, this committee heard a 2-hour presentation from Chief Justice Neto, the Department of Corrections, the Attorney General's office, about how we can let nonviolent criminals out of the prison system a little bit earlier. How treatment is more important than incarceration or punishment in some instances. But they didn't, that's just a Band-Aid approach to the actual problem. We have a chance here to strike at the root of the real issue, which is putting people in jail when they've harmed nobody, harmed not a soul. So we haven't seen a fiscal note, but I can see that how this bill, or certainly the other ones we're hearing today, could save taxpayers in the state millions of dollars. And it would allow resources to be better used on either treatment, as some would prefer, or towards prosecuting violent criminals, domestic violence, rape, murder, burglary, robbery, fraud, all those where they're truly victims. So that's only one side of the equation. The other side is the human element. Young men and women have their lives turned upside down every day in this state because of prohibition. An arrest causes terrible stress on a person. It can cause him to lose his job, it can cause stress in his family, with his children, with his spouse, his or her spouse, I might add. Sometimes it leads to loss of employment. This is a double insult against somebody who is recreationally smoking a plant. If prosecuted and found guilty, the person now carries a criminal record that haunts him for years and years. Could lead to denied work opportunities, added stress for the family, loss of educational scholarships, as we heard, and more. Think of the losses to productivity to our society because of these arrests. It's a horrible, inhumane way to punish somebody who hasn't harmed a soul. Punishment doesn't work. Let's focus as a society on compassion, tolerance, and individual choice, and in some cases rehabilitation. The old model of putting people in jail and putting them with a key doesn't work. Thank you.
Representative.
I don't smoke marijuana or tobacco or anything else, so I felt it's a matter of individual choice. Though sad, I don't want to limit people's ability to do themselves harm or good. But this has nothing to do with liquor or control.
Representative Ginsburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, do you know anything about the numbers of arrests for marijuana possession, use, or dealing, say in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I asked Jeff Lyons, who's our liaison with the Department of Corrections, and he gave me a report that I can send to you all if you'd like. And it said that we have 2,700 people in the prison system. It said about 25 are currently there for charges that are mainly marijuana-based or all drug. You know, I'm sure it wasn't for possession, unless it's maybe a parole violation or a third time strike for possession, but typically it's for maybe distribution. I do not have the statistics on the county facilities or the jails or police departments just making arrests, and I'd like to see that myself. Perhaps one of the people coming up later can speak to that.
Follow up.
And we heard from an earlier witness that the advantage of a bill like Representative Ballancourt's bill that we heard earlier, which would legalize and regulate, is that it would make the whole supply chain for marijuana legal, and it would put illegal dealers out of business. Do you have any sort of response to that?
First of all, that is a logical expectation of what would happen if that bill passed. But secondly, my bill would make it so anybody could just grow his own. I think that takes the criminal element out of it right there.
Representative Ginsburg?
Well,
Yeah, you had a
thank you.
question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sort of a follow-up to Representative Ginsburg's question. You mentioned the report that you could get.
Yeah.
Isn't it true that many perhaps people may be in jail or perhaps prison where they are not in specifically for marijuana charges, but marijuana charges have enhanced sentencing for other charges? Is that, I mean, do you have any data on that?
I think that's true, and somebody spoke that earlier, one of the prosecutors. One of the things I'm concerned about is this parole violation. You see a lot of people going back to jail because they violated their terms of parole, which often includes smoking pot.
Any other questions?
I just need to try again, because if you go to line 14 and 15 on page 1 of your bill, it does in fact put marijuana in with a line that says distilled spirits, wine, malt beverages. What is that section?
Isn't that removing it from that section?
Controlled Drug Act, scheduling by commissioner. Authority to control under this section shall not extend to distilled spirits, wine, malt beverages, marijuana, or tobacco.
Yeah, well,
I guess this is a bunch of sections that have been thrown in here together.
right. Tell me the line again, Representative.
14 and 15 on page 1 of the bill.
Yeah, that's good. That's saying that under that section 318, that people cannot control marijuana the same way they can. I think that has to do with controlled drugs are not handled by the people who do distilled spirit, right? The Liquor Control Commission controls distilled spirits, malt beverages. And right now, under the Controlled Drug Act, it's a different commissioner. So this is just, it's really a housekeeping thing.
All right.
It doesn't add to the liquor control requirements at all.
All set? Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Warden. I'll call Dennis Krogan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,